What's up, you guys? Steven here for Off the Shelf Movie Night to talk to you about physical media, about Blu-rays, 4Ks, and DVDs, the way we like to buy and own our movies and TV shows, display them in a beautiful library, and watch them when and how we please. If you're a physical media collector, you want to be a physical media collector, or you just want to talk about movies, I think you're in the right spot. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and if you like what you see in this particular video, a like would be hugely appreciated. It helps get the word out about the channel. So if you didn't see it, recently I made a pretty sizable Vinegar Syndrome purchase, and I've been trying to live by my, self-imposed rule that I need to watch all my cold buys within 2 weeks to see if they deserve a spot in the library, if they deserve to stay. And I've been doing that. I've been trying to watch them. I'm going to be reviewing them, but I'll be honest with you, I've actually broken down and kind of pushed some of the things I've seen before ahead of the pack, just due to my sheer excitement to see those things again. And one of those things is the 1984 film Cloak and Dagger. I remember seeing this as a kid, like on HBO or something, and I was just very interested to see if this movie held up, if it was still good, still enjoyable. I did a complete unboxing in the Vinegar Syndrome video, and I'll try and remember and link to that so you can see it. Trust me, it's a beautiful set. It's one of the most beautiful packages I've seen of any film this year so far. So as I said, the film is from 1984. Let me double check because you guys will call me out. Yes, 1984. And it is directed by Richard Franklin. Now, Richard Franklin, after this, would go on to do mostly TV and have a pretty reasonable career. Sadly, we lost him in 2007. The film was written by Tom Holland. Tom Holland, you might recognize because he would go on after this to write Fright Night and Child's Play, among many other things. So the film actually has two A-listers at that moment. It stars Henry Thomas, who had just come off doing E.T. So yes, at that moment in time, he was a hot commodity. He was definitely an A-lister. And it stars Dabney Coleman, who had a pretty long career in comedy, but at that point in time had just come off doing 9 to 5, which was also a pretty significant hit. So you had two like fairly sizable names in what really is kind of a small movie. So the movie is the story of a young kid who is, your typical young kid. He's a video game player, that kind of thing. And because he's in the wrong place at the wrong time or right time, depending on your opinion of this, where a scientist hands him an Atari 5200 game cartridge. Yes, Atari plays heavy. It is product placement in this film in a number of places. But anyway, he gets handed this cartridge. Little did he know that inside the cartridge there's a computer chip with the blueprints of the stealth bomber. So it becomes a cat and mouse game of spies trying to catch him, and they're willing to kill to get access to those blueprints. He is on the run basically with the help of an imaginary friend, a video game character, who is played by Dabney Coleman, who also plays his father. And that plays into sort of the underlying story that is in this film. And it's an action-adventure, family action-adventure film, but under that, it's a story of a father and son dealing with tragedy, with loss, and how each of them chooses to deal with it. One of them wraps up in his work, and the other one wraps up in his video game world, in his D&D world, any world other than the real world. So that story is there, and it's done in that sort of innocent 80s way that will never be done again, can never be done again. So watching it, it's sweet. Honestly, that's the word I can give it. So add to that sort of innocent sweetness an action movie with some stunts that probably will never be done in that way again. They just don't do them like that anymore. And you end up with a really fun film. It actually holds up in sort of that period piece kind of way. Like I said, there's an innocence to it that may not ring true to a lot of younger viewers, but that is very 80s. It is very 80s. It's well acted. It's fairly well shot, edited. It's just a solid little movie. I don't know, but it seems like this movie did not do particularly well in theaters, and part of that is because it was in that early sort of era of PG-13 or PG movies. I think this is before PG-13, I believe. But my understanding is this was in the early era of PG, so it's not a G-rated movie. It's not perfectly, fine for kids, but at the same time, it's okay for kids with a little bit of parental guidance, because there's a lot of shooting and some killing in this movie, and that's probably where the PG rating comes from. So, generally speaking, if I'm going to rate just the movie on its own, I would probably give it a solid 6.5, 7 out of 10. It's not an amazing film. It's formulaic in a lot of ways. And again, like I said, it's kind of saccharine, which maybe doesn't ring as true today as it did then. But generally, it's a really fun movie. And I'm going to recommend. The director previous to this had done a movie called Road Games. This is a very cool indicator release of Road Games. A very Hitchcockian style road picture starring Stacy Keach and Jamie Lee Curtis. So if you watch that, you can kind of see the evolution of this director. And then, of course, with the writer, if you haven't already seen it, look at Child's Play and Fright Night, other things that he wrote. So it's a good, solid movie. Let's talk about the presentation now. Packaging, I've already told you, is phenomenal. The 4K presentation is good. It's not amazing. There's a lot of grain, but the grain structure is kept pretty well under control. It's not annoying or, out of bounds. It's pretty grainy, but it's accurate to the age of the source material. I do feel the HDR is a little bit hot. We talked about this on Physical Media Coast to Coast. If you haven't watched that show on YouTube, I recommend it. Then I'm going to highly recommend episode 11 because that's the one I'm on. We talked about it briefly on their show about how the reds pop a little bit hard in comparison to sort of the washed out look of the general color palette of the film. But artifacting is minimal, and it's a substantial upgrade from previous releases. It's the best the movie has ever looked, and probably the best the movie will ever look. So with that in mind, it's a highly recommended pickup. Audio quality is good, but again, nothing to write home about. This is just not going to be your demo disc. You're going to buy this disc because you want to watch the movie, not to show off your sound system or your big TV. Extras. Now, this movie shines on the extras front. I have said this before, and I probably will do at some point a video about my feelings on this in general, but I would rather hear from the head of transportation from a movie and how it was to work on that movie than I would a historian rambling on about, what they read off Wikipedia, and I know that's a little bit aggressive and a little, insulting, but I just feel like a lot of times when you hear historians speak, they're just talking about stuff that you could read on Wikipedia yourself. Whereas if you get even the person who is the most, even if it's a production assistant, you could really get information about what it was like to make the movie. And this movie does that. We have an actress who has a very tiny part, but we learn how she got the part and how she became involved with the director and his family. We have an assistant director talking about the process of making the movie on the daily. And then we have the primary actors too. I would rather hear from those people, and it's a really great set of extras. The writer does an extensive interview and shares a lot of amazing information about how this movie came to be and how it sort of sprang forth from Psycho 2, oddly. So I highly recommend digging into the extras. The only thing I have left to watch is the commentary, which my understanding is pretty phenomenal. But there's just so much on this set to look at that it's just taking a while to get through it, and I wanted to kind of share my feelings on the movie and let you know whether it's worth a pickup or not, because this may sell out. This is not quite as limited as other Vinegar Syndrome releases. This is more in the space of like the Beastmaster set that they put out. So I'm hoping it'll be around a little bit, but I wouldn't sleep on it. This is a great addition. If you're into 80s movies, this is something you should pick up. It's highly recommended. It's a great time. So that is my quick review of Cloak and Dagger, another Vinegar Syndrome from my Halfway to Black Friday sale pickups that I am very, very happy with. Until next we meet, pull something cool off the shelf. Share it with friends and family and remind them why physical media is the best way to watch films and TV at home. I'll see you guys on the next one.